So let's get started. The first part of what we wanted to talk about then is motivation, how to authentically boost motivation for now in the long term. And so let's start with how to define motivation. Motivation is defined as our needs, our desires, our drives. And in that respect, motivation is all about wanting. It's about desiring, right? And so wanting is key because essentially it means when you're connecting to something that authentically inspires you, becomes obviously that much easier to motivate, right? Yet what happens to many of us, myself included, is that a lot of the to-dos that end up on our list are driven by obligation, are driven by pressure, or we don't really know why we've put these things on the list, other than either someone else is telling us it's important, or it's something we decided a while ago but have somehow disconnected from. So Dan Pink, wonderful researcher in the area of motivation, great book called Drive that I highly recommend of his, and he has some others. And his research found that there are three major elements that are required to have motivation and keep motivation. So the first is autonomy, right? This is the desire to direct your own life. He says we like to do things on our own terms as people. So that's why things like micromanaging or being spoon-fed too much, particularly as an employee, ends up being not that favorable, not that motivating for people. The second element that's really important for motivation is mastery, right? It's continually improving in something that matters to you. And so he says humans like to get better at stuff, right? But the key is to look for Goldilocks tasks, as he names them, which are tasks that are neither too easy nor too challenging. And I'm sure you've heard this as a kind of a best practice around identifying goals. The third thing that's required for motivation is purpose, right? And this is the fact that we have a desire to do things in service of something larger than ourselves, right? We like to make a difference, and we like to feel that the time and the effort that we're putting forward in things matter. So what do we learn from this when it comes to motivation? Basically that we're inspired by actions that first have meaning for us, right? They're important to us in some way, which is why we talked about that in the previous session. Actions that employ our strengths, right? So that if we're constantly trying to work with something that we don't have really a capacity to manage to function in, we're constantly going to be hitting up against frustration. The other is we like tasks that encourage us to improve. So if we feel that there's no trajectory, if we feel that there's no path of mastery, then we get bored, right? This is also why many companies, when employees feel like that there's really no ladder for them to climb, they don't get inspired or motivated to really do the best that they can. We also like tasks that, we can engage in on our own terms. Again, we like to tailor the way that we do things, make it in a way that makes sense for us and maybe employs the best of our skills. And also, again, serving something beyond just ourselves. Now, if you are still focusing very much on yourself right now, that's absolutely okay. And is only natural and makes sense because we are in particularly unprecedented circumstances, at least unprecedented for the last while, right? But the idea still becomes that with everything going on, or in any challenging circumstance, we have to orient towards a new bliss, to something to push us forward, right? To push or pull us forward. Because getting stuck, in the trenches and just going over and over again all the situations that are around us and the things that we cannot influence drives people nuts, right? So let me give you a silly example. One of the things that we started to get a little bit inspired and motivated by recently is puzzling. We like to do puzzles. My husband and I started off, this is something that I guess we used to do as kids occasionally on vacation. And so inspired by my sister who has been doing the same way, the same thing, we said, all right, let's drag out some puzzles and do them. And so we started off with, 1,000 pieces, but the ones where you can kind of easily distinguish things. And we had two that had been gifted to us a while ago that were those really beautiful ones, but those really, really difficult ones to do where, there's like 78 shades of gray and 50 pieces fit together, but none of them is right. So we said, these are stupid. We're not doing these. We're just going to do the ones that, are decent. Well, 6 puzzles later, or 5 puzzles later, we've decided we're going to go for the big one. This happened last weekend. It was like, yeah, we can do this. So we get into this difficult puzzle, can't even do the border. I mean, we screwed it up like 5 times, and I'm just getting demotivated because I'm like, I don't know. It all looks the same. It's so big. I don't think we can do this, right? And so then I actually, since this was right before this week's call, I thought, let me apply Dan Pink's stuff. And so I said, how can we, work to our strengths, to mastery? So I tried to really tap into kind of these little weird strategies we picked up in the first 5 puzzles. And I started to apply them there, and I went towards how to make it my own, right, too. So I thought, well, I'm tired, so what color stands out for me? So I picked yellow, and I started with the yellow pieces. And lo and behold, here we are, making it our own, really tapping into things that we had learned. And where does the whole purpose thing come through? Well, we figured out that literally this was the second to last puzzle left. And so if we abandoned this one, there was no more Vithio. There was no more games left unless we ordered more from Amazon, but our puzzling budget is on hold. So this was the purpose, we had to go forward. And so silly, stupid example, but the truth is we figured out in how one small game, something simple that most of you have gone through and have seen, how motivation, how learning ended up going, from nil to higher. And we are down now to the last 7 pieces. So I'll keep you posted. Anyway, back to the question at hand is, for you, the question is, what genuinely inspires you to act right now, right? The objective being to orient yourself towards things that you can influence and change. We keep bringing this up because if we keep banging our heads against things that we cannot influence, that only causes more frustration and stress. So orienting ourselves towards the things that we can influence and change that will create meaning for you and others, right? And start with you if others feels like too much right now. It can be about a momentary motivation or a long-term one, but the idea is simply to, again, engage and decide what is making sense for you right now. So how do you do this? Well, ask yourself a couple of questions and try and answer them in detail, or let them sit around in your head and let's see what springs up. One is, what are your natural wants these days beyond just the basic ones, right? Netflix, sleep, whatever. The second is, what inspires you to create, to change, to protect, to encourage? Even if you're feeling low motivation at times, low energy, see what is muddling inside there, right? What is mixing inside that may be getting planted in the garden, right, of inspirations. The third is, where does your energy and focus flow freely these days? You may find, again, as we said, that some tasks that you used to do easily before are complicated right now. Others are now simpler and easier. So where is that energy flowing to? What rewards work for you? Unfortunately, one of the things that we do often is just we focus on pushing ourselves and pressuring ourselves, but without really allowing us to enjoy some treats and things after that. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how to do that. And then, coming from the last session from Elizabeth Gilbert about the shit sandwich, this refers to these unpleasant things that come along with a task that need to get done if you really want to accomplish the bigger picture of something you truly desire. You still have to go along and deal with these unpleasant tasks. So the question is, what shit sandwich do you choose, right? Do you order? A couple of other things that can help you with motivation, right, is, again, keep motivating towards how you want to feel, not just what you want to achieve. Because the idea is to enjoy in the doing, not just in the accomplishing and the completing. And if we are just ticking off boxes, we can very easily lose a sense of connection, inspiration to the whole point, to why we're doing this in the first place. Remember, again, then, to ask yourself why. Right? Why are these priorities for you? Who set them? Sense check them against what your new sense or new vision of success and progress are. Shift from, again, this way of speaking, as we had mentioned before a bit, shift from this I have to, I must, to I choose to, or I want to, particularly with tasks, even tasks that maybe you don't particularly love. We had the example of Monica's windows, instead of saying, I have to wash the windows, saying, I choose to wash the windows, because as a result, she was then able to really enjoy not just the act of doing that, but the result in a whole different way, right? So when we work from a place of obligation, when we interpret life from a place of obligation and pressure, then that is how we experience it. Throw out the rule book. That's another thing. Really, I encourage you folks to look for ways to do things on your own terms. Forget about how other people do it. Forget about, those voices in our heads that say, you've got to do this way because it's always been done because X person has said it. Figure out ways to do things more on your own terms that can make it lighter for you, easier for you, more fun for you, etc. As well, the question always comes, who and what is holding you back in terms of motivation? Then limit and eliminate them. And when we're talking about motivation in general, things like limiting beliefs can hurt it. Destructive emotional trends or loops can hurt it. Negative influences, energy drains. Try and take a look and see what are those things that are around that you can affect, that you can change, that may be sapping your motivation. As well, in that sense, reconnect with the wins. Sometimes when we're low in motivation, it feels like we'll never get anything done again. And so it's really helpful to think about the times that you have pulled through, that you have figured something out, that you had recovered from a motivation low. And so in that case, celebrate the wins that you have, as we said before. Treat yourself in a nice way. We may be locked in four walls, so to speak, but there are ways that we can allow ourselves to rest, to enjoy, to have fun, to disconnect. And as always, just like we're saying to limit negative influences, then expand on and search and connect to people and resources that can actually keep you motivated. Is that a blog or a podcast? Is there a friend or a loved one who connects and keeps you going? Are there initiatives out there that are inspiring you? Is it your music or music in general? Exercise, whatever it may be that keeps that motivation up. And also when it comes to lows, we say, allow for motivation lows, particularly moments like this. It's only normal and it's only human. Allow for them, but don't take them too seriously. Just take a break.